Now, in this section, we are discussing divisions and decimal fractions. Just like multiplications and decimal fractions, divisions also comes with a set of rules, the set of steps that we have to follow before we conclude or before we find the final answer. And so here is one example which is going to illustrate the rules that we follow. Now, when we divide, that is when we divide a decimal fraction by a whole number. For example, the procedure is very much the same as we do the traditional long division. Now, the extra work is to take care of the decimal. Basically, for example, if we are dealing with 4.105, that which is supposed to be divided by 5, or simply solve 4.105 divided by 5. Obviously, there are some rules that we will follow. Now, we will use the same approach as that other one for long division. And we will write it as indicated here. Now, the divisor is 5. It stays out. This number here, 4.105, it's called the dividend. This dividend is written inside. Now, the thing here is we want to check if 4 can be divided by 5. Now, notice that 4 cannot be divided by 5. In other words, 4 cannot go into 5 any number of times. It goes 0 number of times. And 0 by 5 is 0. And so we write it down here and we subtract. That is 4 minus 0, we get 4. And we write this one down here. The decimal point is moved up there. Now, we have 41. The next thing we want to do is we want to find how many times will 5 go into 41. That is, can we divide 41 by 5? Yes. 41 goes into 5, rather 5 goes into 41 8 times, giving us this. All right, now 8 times 5 is 40, and from it, when we subtract 40 minus 41, we get 1. This is 0, we bring it down as indicated here. Now we are dealing with 10. We want to find out how many times will 5 go into 10. Well, 5 will go into 10 2 times, and so 2 times 5 equals to 10. And when we subtract the 2, we don't get a remainder. The only last number left is 5. Now 5, well, we bring it down. How many times will 5 go into 5? It will go once. And so 1 times 5 is 5. This way, we see that when we subtract the 2, the remainder is 0. And so we can say 4.105 divided by 5 is what? 0.821. Now, most of the time, you will have to divide a fraction by another fraction, a decimal fraction by a decimal fraction. In this case, we were dealing with a decimal fraction by a whole number. In the activity which we will be doing shortly, we will include all the different categories: decimal fraction with a whole number, decimal fraction with a decimal fraction, and also a fraction in its proper way can also be divided by a fraction. Like, for example, 1 by 2, 1 over 2 can be divided by 1 over 3, you see? So in the activities which comes, we will be looking at how to solve this. Here we are dividing fractions. Now, we have been required to divide this. We have to round the answers to the what? To the 100th place, that is to 2 decimal places. And so how do we handle this? Well, what do we have? We do have, right, let's have it here. Okay, so we are supposed to divide 9. Rather, by 9, we are supposed to divide 211.5. Okay, So what is the first step? Now notice that this is the same case like that we have just done, dividing a decimal fraction by a whole number. And so what do we have here? Well, how many times will 9 enter into 211? Well, we could break it down to 20 first, okay? We could deal with these first two numbers if it is not easy to see how many times 9 will go into 211. Now this way, we will check how many times will 9 go into 21. 9 will go into 21 2 times. And so we write here 2. Now 2 times 9. Okay, what will 2 times 9 give us? 2 times 9 will give us 18. Okay, and so in the next step, we subtract. Okay, here we will what? We will subtract. We want to see what happens. So we will subtract. All right, let me, yes, have it like that. So the thing that we now want to do is we want to subtract. So how are we going to deal with it? Well, we now have 21 and 18. What do we get when we subtract 18 from 21? We get 3. So we write it down there. Okay, we get 3 when we take away 18 from 21. This 1, we can now bring it down there. Okay, that way we will now have to divide 31 by what? 31 by 9. So how many times will 9 go into 31? Well, 9 will go into 31. How many times? 3 times. Why 3? 3 for 27, because 3 times 9 is what? 3 times 9 is 27. So we have it down there. Okay. Now the next thing is we want to subtract. We will now want to subtract. Okay. So there we go. Subtract 27 from 31. Wait, what do we get? We get 4. Sorry, we get 4. Yes, that is what we will get. Now, this decimal point here is where we have reached. What do we do with it? Well, this is now 1, okay? We are now remaining with this 5 here. So we now put the decimal point up here, right away there. Okay, that will transfer this to this side, and we'll bring the 5 down here. So that instead of having 4, we now have what? 45. So now the next question is, how many times will 9 go into 45? 9 will go into 45. How many times? 5 times. And 5 times 9 is what? Is 45. Yes, it's 45. So then what do we do? We subtract. So we subtract 45 minus 45. What do we get? We get 0. Okay, it's 0. So this is where our division stops. Well, how do we conclude? We then conclude that 211, okay, 0.5 when divided. Let's use the sign for division. When divided by 9, what we get is what? Is 23.5, okay? So just really quick to get through. We had already been given this, okay? We already have this given to us. 211.5 and this 9. So we have to divide 211.5 by 9. The first thing is if we take this first two, we see that 21 can allow 9 to go into it. In other words, 9 can go into 21 2 times. And this is where we get the what? The 2. Now, 2 times 9 is 18. Okay? So now we have to subtract from 21, 18. That is 21 minus 18, we get 3. And so we bring this 1 down so that we get 31. Now, 31 can also divide 9. In other words, how many times will 9 enter into 31? Well, 9 enters into 31 3 times for 27. So we put 3 here. 3 times 9 is 27. Now, 31 minus 27 is 4. So now, 4 cannot divide 9. Okay? And so we put a decimal point there. After putting a decimal point, we bring the 5 down here as 45. Because putting the decimal point will push what? Will push this decimal point out here. So now we have 45. The question is, how many times will 9 go into 45? Well, it goes 5 times. So now 5 times 9 gives 45. So when we subtract the 2, we get 0. And so we conclude that 211.5 divided by 9 is what? 23.5. Yes, that is how we would handle activity 1. Okay. Activity 1, part 1. Well, we could now move on to activity 1, part 2. Activity 1, part 2. In activity 1, part 2, we are dealing with 2 fractions. So how do we handle the case of 2 fractions? Well, we have been given that the divisor is 0.2 and the dividend, the number inside is what? 0.31. We are supposed to divide this. Okay. Now notice that the first step, since we are dealing only with fractions, decimal fractions, the first step is to transfer this decimal point. Okay, let me change it this way. So we have to change this decimal point, move it from here, from the divisor here to this point here. So if we move it from in front of 2 to the back of 2, we will also do the same for this other second one, meaning the decimal point will move away from this position to a new position. In other words, what we are going to be having will now be, well, this is what we are going to be having. We will now be having 0, 2 or simply 2. Okay, we can write it as 2. We can write it as 2, and inside here will be have what? 3.1. Because now we have moved the decimal point from this front position to the back position. Well, now we want to see how many times will 2 go into 3? Well, 2 goes into 3 1 time. Okay, to give us what? To give us 2. And 2 times 2 is what? 2 times 2 is, sorry. How many times will 2 go into 3? 2 will go into 3 once. We put it there. And 1 times 2 is what? Is 2. Okay, 1 times 2 is 2. Now, the next thing we want to deal with. Let's rearrange this, yes. The next thing we want to deal with is, now, it's 2, not 1. Yeah. So once again, 2 goes into 3 once. And that is what we have here, 1. Now 1 times 2 is 2. So we want to subtract. That is 3 minus 2. What do we get for 3 minus 2? Well, for 3 minus 2, we get 1. Now the problem here is that 1 cannot be divided by 2. In other words, 2 will go into 1 0 number of times. And that is now the step where we have to put a decimal point there. And when we put a decimal point, we move this decimal point, we will now move this 1 down here, like that. That means we now have 11. Okay, so now here is the question. How many times will 2 go into 11? 2 will go into 11 5 times. So that 5 times 2 gives us what? 5 times 2 gives us 10. Okay, and now we get the difference between the two. That is, we subtract. We subtract that. That is 11 minus 10. Now 11 minus 10 will give us a value of what? Will give us a value of 1. Okay. Now the next thing here is, since we already have a decimal point here, we just do what? We just pull down a 0. Then we check the number of times 2 will go into 10. How many times that will be? Well, that will be 5 times, because 5 times 2 is what? 5 times 2 is 10. And so we then subtract between the two. That one will give us what? That one will give us 0, 0. Okay? We don't get anything when we take away 10 from 10. And so we can therefore say, in conclusion, 0.2 divided, rather 0.31 divided by 0.2 is 1.55. Okay? But before I conclude, just a quick recap of what happened. We have been given the divisor 0.2 and the dividend 0.31. We have to divide 0.31 by 0.2. So the question is, how do we handle this? Well, the first step is to move this decimal point from the divisor 1 step to the right. When we do that, we also have to transfer the same number of decimal places to the right of the dividend. So we now move it from here, giving us only 2 as the divisor and 3.1 as the dividend. Now we want to find out how many times will 2 go into 3. 2 will go into 3 once. So we put it here. Now 1 times 2 is 2. So we subtract. That is 3 minus 2 is 1. Now, how many times will 2 go into 1? 2 will go into 1 0 number of times. And so that means we put a decimal point there. And when we transfer the decimal point there, we pull down this 1 right here, so that we have 11. Now the question is, how many times will 2 go into 11? 2 will go into 11 5 times. And so 5 times 2 is 10. Okay? So that when we get the difference between the two, when we subtract 11 minus 10, we get 1. Okay? And so we now plug down a 0. Okay? We add a 0 here. So that, rather we add a 0 here. So that we check how many times will again 2 enter into 5. Well, rather 2 enter into 10, 2 will enter into 10 5 times. So that 5 times 2 is what? Is 10. We subtract the 2 and we get 0, 0. Well then, from this we can conclude that 0.31, okay, 0.31 when divided by 0.2, what we get is 1.55. Yes, that is how we would handle question 2 of activity 1. Now in question 3 of activity 1, we are dealing with a fraction, a decimal fraction, and what? And a whole number. So let's have it written down. So we have right, so there we go. Yes. So we have 4.6 as the divisor. 6 is the divisor. Excuse me. Then 58 is the dividend. Okay, so now what we want to do here is this. We first want to transfer the decimal point away from the divisor so that it's easy for us to deal with things. So what are we going to have? Well, we will then move one step to the right. Okay, one step here until we don't have a decimal point in the divisor. So here we only move one step. So that for the divisor, we now have 46. Then for the dividend, we also move one step this way. When we move one step, we will be having 580. That is what we get. Okay, because each time we move one step, the number increases by a product of 10. Here is now the question. We can take the whole of 580, or we can simply do what? We can simply take 58, and we want to find out what happens. That is, how many times will 46 enter into 58? It will enter how many times? It will enter once. And 1 times 46 is what? Is 46. So then, at this stage, what we want to do is to subtract. Okay, so we are going to be subtracting from 58. We will subtract 46. Okay, so the question is, what is 58 minus 46? Well, 58 minus 46 gives us 8. Okay, so now is there a way that 46 can divide 8? No. So we just plug this down. We bring this down here. We bring this 8 down. Rather, we bring the 0 down. Yes. So now we have brought this 0 down. Okay. We have brought the 0 down. So now the question is, how many times will 46 enter 80? 46 enter 80, how many times? Only what? Only once. Okay, it enter only once. And 1 times 46 is what? Is 46. So yes, we have it there as 46. Now we want to find the what? We want to find the difference. That is, we subtract 80 minus 46. What is 80 minus 46? Well, 80 minus 46 will give us a value of 34. Now, how do we deal with this 34 which we have just got? Now, this 34 which we have got, we want to find out how many times 46 enter 34. Well, 36 cannot divide 46. In other words, it will enter 0 number of times. So instead of putting 0, since we already have 11, we just put a decimal point. And when we put a decimal point onto this 34, we add 0, meaning we get 340. Okay, we get, yeah, 0, we plug 0 here, so that we get 340. Now the question is, how many times will 46 enter into what? How many times will 46 enter into 340? Well, we can first check that just really quick. So we want to find out from 340, how many times will 46 enter in it? Well, it enters 7 times. So we have it there. Now, 7 times 46, we want to check. 46 times 7 will give us 322. So we have 322. So we minus, we subtract it so that we can get the difference. All right. So when we subtract this, what do we get? Well, here we get 18. Okay, we get 18 here. So that is 340 minus 322 gives us 18, excuse me. Now, is there a way 46 can divide 18? No, there is no way. And because of that, we again, because 18, that is because 46 will go into 18 0 number of times. Put it here, 0 number of times. Okay, that will give us 180. So 180, the question is how many times will 46 go into 180? Well, 46 times 2 is 46 times 2 is what? Is 80. Well, it goes roughly 4 times. Roughly 4 times. That is, we want to find out what we get. How many times 41 will go in what? Rather 46, it will go rather 3 times. So 3. So 3 for what? Well, let's check. It will be 3 for, that is 46 times 3. 46 times 3. What do we get for that? Well, we get 138. So 138, like that. Now, let's first check our working and we see if we are on the right track, okay? We want to check our working and see if we are on the right track. And that way, we will be able to determine, you know, what to do if we are not on the right track. If we are not on the right track, then we will have to do what? We will have to redo. We had to conclude it. So yeah, it looks like we went wrong somewhere. Now let's check. If we move one step here, we will be having 46, and we move one step here, we'll be having 580, because look, 58, the way it is the same as 58.0. So now, if we move one step to the right, we will also do the same here. So that we now have 46 this side, which is this, then we have 580 here. The question now is, looking at 58 and 46 first, how many times will 46 go into 58? It will go once. So we write this 1. Now 1 times 46 is 46, and we subtract. When we subtract, what do we get here? Well, when we subtract 58 minus 46. Well, we get, do we get 8? No. We get, well, let's just subtract this right away. 58 minus 46. Oh, it's 12. So it's not 8, it's 12. This is supposed to be 12. This is 12. We write it here. 1, 2. Yeah. That is where we went wrong. We went wrong here. Now the thing here is 12 be divided by 46. No, 12 cannot be divided by 46. And so we bring this 0 down here, right there. So now the question is, can 120 be divided by 46? Yes, 120 can be divided by 46. Okay. And when we divide 120 by 46, what do we get? Well, 120 by 46 will give us 2. 2 for what? 2 for 92. So we will be having here 92. Yes. 2 times 46 is 92. So what do we get here? What do we get? Well, 120 minus 92, that is 120 minus 92 is going to give us 28. All right, so we get 28 right here. So this will give us 28. So now can 28 be divided by 46? That's the question. Can 28 be divided by 46? No. 28 cannot be divided by 46. And so what do we do? 0 here. Okay. It's like now we have transferred the decimal point from the new position, okay? From the new position, which is here, to another new position. And so when we have the decimal point here, this will be now 0. We will add 0 here to 280. So now the question is, how many times will 46 go into 280? So let's check. 280 and 46. It will go 6 times, okay? So we are supposed to have here 6. All right. Now, 6 times 46, what will it be? 6 times 46 will be 276. So this will be 76. 76. Yes. That is what we are going to be having, 276. Now the question is, what do we get when we subtract this? Well, 276 from 280 will give us 4. So now is 46 be divided by 4? No. 46 cannot be divided by 4. In other words, 46 will go 0 number of times into 4. And that way help us to have a 0 here. Okay. Again, can 40 be divided by 46? No. We put another 0. Now we check. Now I want to check. How many times will 46 go into 400? Well, into 400, 46 will go 8 times. So we have it here, 8. Now, what is 8 times 46? Well, we check. 8 times 46 will give us a value of 300 and what? And 68. So yeah, 368. And what do we do with that? Well, we subtract. Like that. So when we subtract, what do we get? We get 32. Yeah, we get 32. Now, this calculation could continue, but we are supposed to stop after 2 decimal places. Okay, so just a quick recap. When we are required to divide fractions or decimal fractions, transfer the decimal point from the divisor to the right. The same number of decimal places you counted is what you do for the dividend. In this case, we would get 46 and 580. Now, we begin the process to divide. 58 will allow 46 to go into 8 ones. So that 1 times 46 is 46. We subtract the 2 to get 12. We now bring this 0 here so that we have 120. 120 can be divided by 46. In other words, 46 would go into 120 2 times, and 2 times 46 would give us 92. 92 taken from 120 would give us 28. Now, 28 cannot be divided by 46. So we do what? We put a decimal point there. We would have put 0 point, but because we already have 12, there is no need for a 0 there. So what is this then supposed to mean? Well, we put a decimal point there and we add a 0 here. Now, 280 can be divided by 46. In other words, 46 will enter into 280 6 times. So that 6 by 46 is what? 276. When we get the difference, it will be 4. Now, 4 cannot be divided by 46. In other words, 46 will enter into 0 number of times. That will give us 40. And that will extend to 400 because even 40 cannot be divided by 46. But 400 can. Now 400 can be divided by 46, and 46 will enter into 400 8 times for 368. The difference between the two gives 32. We could continue with the calculation, but we have to stop because we are required to stop into decimal places, you see. So now we can conclude 58 when divided, okay, 58 when divided by 4.6, we get 12.608, which is what we got here. So this is going to be the answer. Now we could carry on even with what? With the fourth example, which is this. The fourth activity is dividing this by that. Well, let's work on that activity also. Now this is activity 4. So in activity 4, what we are supposed to do is to divide. What are we dividing? We are dividing 1.632 by what? 0.08, okay? 0.08 is used to divide 1.632. So, as I indicated earlier on, the first thing is to move the decimal places a little bit away. So, what will that give us? Well, that should give us a next set for calculation. So, we move how many steps from the divisor? 1, 2. So, we will be having 8. And also, we do the same here 1, 2, giving us 163. Okay. Giving us 163.2. Now we can carry on with our division. Now, can 16, let's start with 16. Can 16 be divided by 8? Yes, 16 will go into 8 2 times, okay? So because 2 times 8 is what? 2 times 8 is 16. Yeah. And now when we get the difference between the two, we get the difference between the two, the result will be, well, the result will be 0. And so we write down this what? We write down this 3. Yeah. We bring down the 3. Okay. Well, can 3 be divided by 8? No, 3 cannot be divided by 8. In other words, 8 will go into 3 0 number of times. So we put the 0 there. Okay. And a point. That means here we can now add a 0. Okay. So when we add a 0, rather instead of adding a 0, since we do have a 2 here, we bring this 2 down. Okay. Now we check. Can 38 be divided by, can 32 be divided by 8? Yes. 32 can be divided by 8. How many times will 8 go into 32? It will go 4 times. 4 times 8 is what? 4 times 8 is 32. And now the next thing for us is to subtract. When we subtract, what do we get? Well, when we subtract, we don't get anything. 0 here and 0 there. So we can then conclude that 163, or rather 1.632 divided by 0.08 is what? Is 20.4. So just a quick recap. This is what we have been given. 1.632 supposed to be divided by 0.08. The question is, how do we handle this? Well, we first have to transfer this decimal point until it's no longer available on the divisor. So we move 1, 2 steps here. After 8, we do the same. We count the number of places 1, 2, and we place it here. Now we are having what? We are having 163.2 supposed to be divided by 8. So what do we do then? Well, taking 16. 16 can divide 8. In other words, 8 will go into 16 2 times. And 2 times 8 is 16. And so when we subtract the 2, we get nothing. Now we bring this 3 here. Okay. Now this 3 which we have brought down, we want to divide it by 8. But can 3 be divided by 8? No, 3 cannot be divided by 8. In other words, 8 will go into 3 0 number of times. So we put the 0 there with a decimal point. And so now when we put a 0 with a decimal point here, this decimal point which we had here will now move to up to 2, rather after 2. And then we pull down the 2 here. So this gives us 32. Now 32 can then be divided by 8. In other words, 8 will enter into 32 4 times. And 4 times 32 is what? Is 32. This way, we can now subtract and we get 0, 0. Once we have got 0, 0, that is where we stop. And we just do what? We then conclude. What is our conclusion then? Well, our conclusion is that 1.6, okay, when it is divided by 0.08, what we get is 20.4. So yes, this is how the calculation moves on. Now, I'm giving you one task, that is activity 5. Please go ahead and handle activity 5. Activity 5 is given right here. Yes, we have to divide 8.709 by 100. Okay, so please go ahead and do the division. Okay, go ahead and do the division. The division of what? The division by 100 of 8.709. you do that? Okay, how would you do it? Well, that is the task left for you. Please work on that and submit your solution.